Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. This episode is a previous recording of our live Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer series, where a live audience asks questions of professional Scrum trainers. We hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located today. Welcome to Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer. I'm Lindsay Vellicina, and I will be your moderator today. And today's session is going to be focused on product ownership. So I hope you all brought your product ownership questions. We have professional Scrum Trainer Sam Falco here today, based in St. Petersburg, Florida, to answer any questions that you have. And we're looking forward to a fun session today. So very quickly about Scrum.org. So we are the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber in 2009. And our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. And we do that through our professional Scrum training. We have over 350 professional Scrum trainers globally, including Sam, who we have here today. And we offer professional Scrum certification and some ongoing learning opportunities. There are a lot of free ways to learn about Scrum and Agile on our website, so please check those out. You obviously are aware of our webinar program, so that's good, but there are other ways for you to learn as well, just right there at your fingertips on our website. So with that, I hope that this session plays an important part in that ongoing learning journey, and I want to hand it over to Sam to introduce himself. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Lindsay. I am really excited to be here. This is my first time doing Ask a PST, so we'll see how well I comport myself. I've been in the software industry since 1999. Prior to that, I was in network engineering and then shifted over to software development. And I have served in a variety of capacities in a variety of industries. Desktop publishing, I've been in anti-malware, insurance, and I now work in the financial sector. I've been a product owner, I've been a Scrum Master, I have been a developer. So I've done all of the things on Scrum teams. Right now, I primarily focus my energies on Scrum Mastering, but as I said, I've done all of those things.
Awesome. All right. So with that, we can start collecting questions. So please utilize that Q&A box that I mentioned earlier and start entering your questions so that we can get them answered for you. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. So Scott is here. Welcome, Scott. I know you're a frequent flyer here on Ask a PST. I'm glad to see that you joined us today. So Scott's question is how should an architect that supports multiple teams participate? Mainly daily Scrum and sprint planning. Should they attend for multiple teams? In my case, it's only 2 teams, so it seems manageable.
How should an architect that supports multiple teams participate? And even though it was a stumble, Lindsay, I think many daily scrums and sprint planning is also something to be aware of. Now, in
Yes.
Scott's case, it's just the 2 teams, seems manageable, but that is often a problem if an
Right.
architect or whatever person who has a skill needed by multiple teams is needed by many teams, it can become very cumbersome. So it's difficult. There's no one size fits all answer. At the very least, you want to work with the teams. How often do you need me? Do you really need me in every daily scrum and every sprint planning? Can I serve in sort of an orbital capacity where I check in with you on a regular cadence so that you see me, you know how to get in touch with me, and there's never going to be more than n number of days before we get together again. That's not to say don't talk to me between those incidences, but do know that you at least will have contact with me from time to time. If it makes sense for you to attend the daily scrums, that would be because you're doing work for the Scrum team that contributes to the sprint goal. If you're not doing that, then you don't need to be in the daily Scrum because you're not really having that contribution.
Makes
Sprint
sense.
planning, similarly, are you going to be involved in the work of the Scrum team in a very specific manner, working toward the sprint goal? Then yes, you're going to want to be there. But basically, play it by ear. I hope that helps.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. I hope that helps, Scott. So let's see here. So here's an interesting one that came in. When you are a product owner of 4 teams, how do you manage balancing and being available to all members?
Yeah, product owner for 4 teams. Now, the Nexus scaling framework that Scrum.org uses and I've leveraged, if you're a product owner, you're a product owner for the product, and that can be 3 to 9 teams. So this is a very practical problem that can arise. And part of it is to remember that you are the product owner, you're not there to spoon feed the team members answers or product backlog items. In a case like this, you want to be clear about the vision for your product, what your product goal is, and help your team members understand where it is you're going so that they can make some decisions, since you're not going to be able to be available all of the time. Because as a product owner, you've also got those responsibilities to your stakeholders and to be doing product research and etc. So it's a matter of working with your team so that they're not dependent on you. Now, if you are the product owner of 4 teams and 4 products, that's a whole other fiasco, I think is the word. I
Yes.
see that often, where that's just an organization really not understanding what the product owner is for. And so in that case, you want to work with your Scrum Master, or if there's a Scrum Master on more than one team, your Scrum Masters, to help the organization understand, why do we use Scrum in the first place? What's the value of the product owner? And it is to drive product value, not manage work for a bunch of teams. I hope that helps.
Makes sense. Thank you. All right. So some great questions coming in here. So this question comes from Lyle. What are some tips and techniques for determining the value of a work item, such as using a matrix to assign a numerical value? So what are some tips there on value, Sam?
Yeah, tips and techniques for understanding and determining the value of work items
Yes.
is, wow, that's a big question. I'm really glad you asked it, Lyle, because that gets to the heart of what we're at. Very frequently, it's do all of the things and it's the order they came in or something like that. We want to really drive the product value. We want to see what's the most value for the product. And it seems very easy. How much revenue is it going to bring in? Well, not every product is bringing in revenue. For starters, some products are there to prove a concept. So we want to say, what types of value are there? Is this efficiency? Is this revenue? Is it the market value? We can increase our market share whether or not it affects the revenue. Is it value we expect to capture in the future? Is it risk reduction? I've seen matrices and that sort of thing that try to quantify every aspect. And I think that's a trap, because you can't quantify everything. Certainly bring data, certainly look at what you can, but sometimes you're going to have to make a judgment call. So a matrix can be helpful, but remember that is not the end all be all. It can become a trap, because something that we know we want to do for reasons that have nothing to do with quantifiable numbers, it's going to make us happy to get this done. It's going to have a social value. There's value in doing this because it will make the world a better place. Well, you might not be able to put a number on that, but it's still work to be done. I hope that helps.
Great advice. Thank you. And there was a question that actually came in through the chat that I want to ask, but I do want to make a little public service announcement for everybody. If you have questions for Sam, please try to use the Q&A and not the chat so that we can capture them all after the session, so that any questions we do not get to, we will be able to address them offline in some way. Yes. So next question here. How should product ownership look like for different PO stances? Should it look the same no matter how the PO role is implemented in the organization? So I'm not sure I'm fully understanding the question here, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the stances of a product owner, Sam, and opportunities to utilize them.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't quite understand the question as it's written, because each stance requires a different approach, so it's going to look different no matter what it is. I think that very often product ownership starts with write product backlog items, write down what stakeholders are demanding. If you're lucky, you get to choose what order they're done in, but you spoon feed things to the team. And I think you want to grow beyond that so that you are truly understanding the value of the product, not just taking orders. And then over time, I think this goes back to the question about serving as a product owner on multiple teams, because
Yes.
you can't then be so deep in the weeds. You have to be able to give a direction and trust your team to understand where that could go and take it in a direction and take some risks communicating with you so that you are able to sort of course correct, but certainly give them sometimes the freedom to take a sprint and go in a direction and see if it works. I hope that helps. I don't really know how to answer
Yeah,
that
feel
without
free
going too
to,
deep into.
that
Go ahead.
question came from Matush. If there are follow-up questions, please feel free to add those to the Q&A. Now, this next question is kind of fun because we did have Sam on a podcast somewhat recently talking about a similar topic, what's in a name when it comes to job titles and roles and accountabilities and all of that fun stuff. So this question is quite simple. The answer is not quite simple, but what is the difference between the roles of a product owner and a product manager?
Difference between a product owner and a product manager. There might be no difference in your organization. There might be worlds of difference in your organization. Product manager, well, a product owner needs to function in that world. If the product manager, product owner rather, is concerned with product release and how it does in the marketplace, then congratulations, you're an agile product manager. You happen to have the role of product owner in your organization. In some organizations, a product manager sort of oversees product owners who have their area of expertise within a product suite, perhaps. And then you might not have that one-to-one mapping with product manager. But ultimately, it's what you make it. And yeah, that was one of the things that I talked about in the podcast with Dave West, is that what people call the roles may not matter. It may be what you do with it. I think that's as far as I can go with that right now, unless there's a clarifying or a deeper question to go into. I hope that helped.
Awesome. Thank you. No worries. Thank you. I will share a link to that podcast as well shortly after I ask this next question. So, this question from Heather: as a PO, how do you prioritize bugs with the exciting new work?
How do you prioritize bugs with the exciting new work? Yeah, that's a great question because the technical aspect of the product really properly belongs with the developers who understand that. So you want to collaborate with your developers on what is the value of fixing this bug, what is the risk of not fixing it. The same thing when the team discovers that it has generated some tech debt. You as product owner, of course, want to improve the value of the product. Sometimes that's adding new features or the exciting new work, but sometimes that is fixing defects, improving the quality of the product so that it can continue to give value to your customers or to your users. So work with your developers who should understand the needs and value that goes into fixing that. So here's a specific example from early in my Scrum career. We had a bug in a product that we all on the team considered fairly minor. If you clicked a button when it shouldn't have an effect, it wouldn't do anything because it shouldn't have the effect, but it should have been grayed out. That button by right should have been grayed out. So the bug was button is not grayed out when it should be grayed out. And we thought, well, it doesn't hurt anything, so there's no value in fixing it. But the product owner was getting serious pressure from one of our major customers. They didn't like it. They just didn't like that this happened. And well, they had a lot of clout because they were paying a lot of money. So ultimately, we talked it over with the product owner and we said, we can get that fixed, but let's try to tie that in with something else when we enhance this feature. And so that feature that it was connected to got moved up in the product backlog order, and then we fixed it as part of that item. If the customer wouldn't have been satisfied with that, because that was the answer he went back to them with, if they had said, no, fix it now, we're not going to pay you for the next iteration, well, then it would have been a top priority. Hope that helps.
Great, thank you. All right, so this question here, there were two similar questions submitted. I'm going to merge them together. So on my team, we tend to separate sprint planning and backlog refinement so that we are ready to go into sprint planning. How do you approach it? So what have you seen on teams with how they approach refinement sessions to be prepared for sprint planning and whatnot?
I think refinement, I've seen it approached in a number of ways. Going back to my earliest Scrum team, we were together for so long and were so conversant with the product domain, even the developers really understood it, and we understood the product, that we found that a separate refinement meeting really wasn't necessary. We could refine within the sprint planning. That was because we actually gave sprint planning the proper amount of time. I see often teams want to cut that short. Well, you definitely don't have time to do refinement if you've shrunk your sprint planning horizon so drastically. So for starters, I would say make sure that you have enough time for sprint planning so that when you're in the middle of planning and you say, oh gosh, we thought we understood that. We thought that was refined, but we need to break it down a little farther. You have the space to do that. I think having separate refinement sessions can be super valuable because it gives you a chance to take a break from what you're doing now and look forward a little into the future, next sprint or a sprint or two away, to kind of get a sense of what we might do, what we might find valuable. But refinement is not merely a team activity. This is maybe going to be a little controversial with some folks, but I think that sometimes, especially with things that are much farther out, it's okay for the product owner and the stakeholders to do a little refinement, maybe with the input of an architect or a senior engineer who really is deep in those decisions about how things will be implemented, to break it down into smaller pieces before it comes to the team. So the team is not overwhelmed with decisions to be made. They can take the bite-sized chunks. The old guidance was, I'm trying to remember how it was phrased, but that up to 10% of the team's capacity might be used on refinement or something like that. And I think that's still a decent rule of thumb, where if you discover that you're spending way more than that, then maybe you're spending too much time on refining. You might be generating waste by considering things that you really don't need to worry about until sprint planning. But definitely leave some time in sprint planning for refinement that may pop up unexpectedly, even if you have refinement sessions, and then balance how much time are you spending looking forward with how much time are you actually working on getting your sprint goal done. Remember, that's the most important thing in the sprint, is to get that sprint goal done. And if you find that you need to take smaller bites as a result of getting that work done and not spending the time with refinement outside of planning, then take a less ambitious sprint goal the next time and a less ambitious forecasted scope. I hope that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great advice. So this is a fun question. So can you share tips and tricks on how to balance between stakeholders and developers?
Tips and tricks on balancing between stakeholders and developers. I think I'm going to dodge that question just a little bit and say that you're not balancing between, but helping collaborate.
Yes.
Remember that part of what makes Agile work well is when business folks and developers work together constantly. The One of the principles behind the Agile Manifesto is that the business and I can't remember how it's exactly worded, but something to the effect of should be working together daily. And that is one of the principles of extreme programming, is that you bring the developers to the problem, you bring them to the people. It's not always possible, which is why XP is not always possible. Again, I may hear from some XP folks telling me that I'm wrong soon after this. I'm open to that. I'm wandering off of the point. Balancing stakeholders versus developers. I think take that versus out. Collaborate with. Have your developers work with your stakeholders. Talk to your stakeholders. Certainly not 100% of the time. There's nothing wrong with having those conversations. You don't need to be a gatekeeper between them. In one of the jobs I was in, there was a younger developer new to it and the grizzled old veteran, and they were talking about this very question: how do we understand what they want? And the older developers said, I'll tell you what you do. You get up out of your chair, you take your butt over to building 4, and you ask, and he named the stakeholder who had asked for this particular what they meant. And there was like this dead silence. Gonna look to me like I was gonna be some sort of tiebreaker. I was a scrum master on this team. Like it, he said it. That's exactly what you do. So foster an environment of collaboration with stakeholders and developers, I think, is the most powerful thing I can suggest that you do. Hope that helps.
Awesome. And I did drop a link to a learning series on the Scrum.org website that is all focused on stakeholder relations and that type of thing. So please check that out. And this next question I'm pulling is a kind of a 3-part question. So I am new to the world of Scrum. I came from operations and back office. How can I best get myself ramped up as a product owner and provide value? What are the most important things to focus on first? And how do I best facilitate discovery?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like you've been thrown into the deep end without a life ring or any little floaties on your arms. So welcome to the deep end. So first of all, I would say take a professional Scrum product owner class that will equip you. It's not just about getting a certification, it really is about giving you the fundamentals of what product ownership is all about. And that will serve you very well. If that is not possible for you for one reason or another, I will point you to the product owner learning path on Scrum.org. And I think, Lindsay, have you already posted that in the
I
chat?
have I have not, but I am pulling it right
Yeah,
now. Our
that is
product owner learning journey. Yep.
a super, super resource. And one of the things I love about it when I first started down my Scrum journey with Scrum.org was that you create your account and then you take this learning path and you can check off the things as you do them. So it keeps track of where you are. So it's a really handy resource. So that's the best thing you can do. And then also Don McGreal and I forgot the other author's name, book, The Professional Scrum Product Owner book is
Yes.
very valuable. So that's the best ramp up. What would you focus on first? I would focus on understanding your accountability within the Scrum framework. So take a look at what the Scrum Guide says about your accountability. Talk with your manager or director, or whoever you report to. This is what Scrum Guide says I ought to be accountable for. What does my organization say I ought to be accountable for? Where is there a mismatch? And understand that, because it's nothing more painful than thinking you understand what you need to be doing and discover that the expectation was entirely different. So just because it says it in the Scrum Guide doesn't mean that your organization understands it the same way. So that would be something to do, is make sure that you're in alignment with your higher ups, so to speak. And if they want you to do things that are counter to Scrum, explore why, and maybe help them understand why it would be more helpful to go in a different direction. And that's where a good Scrum Master can also help you. So if you have a strong Scrum Master, lean on them and leverage their expertise for how to best deliver value. Remember, it's always about delivering value. It's not about hewing to what the Scrum Guide says. It's about using Scrum as a tool to deliver value. Then what was the third part, Lindsay?
Third one is, how do I best facilitate discovery?
How I best facilitate discovery. I'm just gonna turn this over to somebody else, and I'm gonna say there is a book called Discover to Deliver that will really serve you well if you grasp its principles. It's not a Scrum book, but it is a product discovery book that I have found very valuable, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the author. Hope that helps. That was a big one. Give me a
Yeah,
soft.
definitely. And I dropped a link to our product owner resources. We recently restructured what we've done with our learning paths and things like that. But I posted the most recent resources for product owners. And I have another page that I'm going to pull and post as well on the capabilities of professional product ownership. So I will share that also shortly. So thank you so much
Can I have a
for that
softball?
question. What's that?
Can I have a softball now?
Okay, so let's see. I don't know. These are all very, I don't think we really have softballs here. We have all really
Oh, well,
awesome questions.
be with your best shot then.
So, question from, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Elise. Uh, do you have any advice on how to bring leadership on the Agile journey when they're very fixed on strict timelines and scope?
How to bring leadership on an Agile journey when they're fixed on timelines and scope. Oh, that is tough. And it starts with open and honest conversation. It starts with empathy. What is it you would like to accomplish? And it's the question you're asking the leaders. And if they say, we want this by then, you have to ask what if. A lot of what if questions. What if we don't get this by then? What will happen? And not heads will roll, but like literally what will happen with the business. And then adjusting from there. I think you have to understand where they're coming from. Often leaders are under pressure themselves. So it's easy to fall into, well, they are putting too much pressure on me. Well, they have pressure themselves. So understanding the source of their pressures, what their incentives are, can help you take steps toward a more empirical discovery of value rather than we've decided what you're going to do and you're going to do it by this date, and help them understand that your developers are most likely highly motivated people who really want to deliver cool stuff and do cool things. They're not gold bricking. They're, when they say this is going to take us longer than you want it to, that's a warning sign, and help them be aware of the consequences of that. If we try to deliver this that quickly, we're going to break something, or we might leave ourselves open to lawsuits. Uh, we might really hurt some folks, and this is part of the problem that happened at Boeing over the course of a long time, was that executives lost sight of the dangers of pushing too fast, pushing too hard. They lost that culture of excellence in engineering. So all you can do is point out the dangers. If that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. That was good advice there. Tricky one. So how far do I, as a product owner, have to break down the user stories when creating them? This is coming from a non-technical product owner, as they describe themselves.
Okay. How far do you need to break down? The phrase was user stories. Remember, user
Yep.
stories are not the only thing that you can use. So,
Right.
you know, that's something to be aware of. I'm going to go off on just a small tangent here, is to be aware of insisting that everything be in user stories, because not everything is a user story, or you get some sorts of weird behaviors. I shared one recently on a Reddit thread. Early in my career, I saw a user story that said, as a database, I want this table so that I can store the data that would be stored in this table. It was absolutely ludicrous. Nothing user story about it. How far should you break things down? I would say not that far. Allow the team to decompose work items into what makes sense for them.
Yes.
Ultimately, I said this at the beginning, I'll reiterate, ultimately what you would love to be able to do as a product owner is say, this is the vision, this is the product goal, and at every sprint planning, you're saying, well, this is the product goal. What do you think is a good first step? And have your team collaborate on the goal and allow them to figure out what product backlog items are necessary to fulfill that goal. So at first, you may have to work with your team fairly closely to make sure they understand that they need to be delivering business value every sprint. And while there may be lots of technical things that you as a non-technical product owner don't quite grasp, that's fine. But make sure that we're delivering business value and help them understand what business value is. But as you give them more and more understanding of what that business value is, you should be able to pull back and not have to spend quite so much time writing stories. That's not your job as a product owner. Your job is to ensure that the work that the team does enhances the value of the product, is the most valuable thing to do. And so writing user stories is probably not your best use of time. Right? Lindsay, did I come anywhere near the answer to that question?
I think so. I think you captured the essence of it. Let me just refer back to it really quickly.
For those of you
Yes,
listening,
the
I told
question was
Lindsay
how
started.
far do we break
I,
down the user stories when creating them? Sorry
I
for
told Lindsay
interrupting
when
you.
we started, before we started, I have a tendency to go off on tangents and to rein me in. So, uh,
Yeah, but these sessions are good for that because sometimes the tangents, or usually the tangents, do bring some value and spark other questions from our audience. So that is totally cool. And I do want to drop a link to a recent case study because it ties into what Sam was talking about with empowering the team as a product owner. There's some good examples of that in this case study that I am sharing with an HR platform company. I highly recommend taking a look at that. There's some great product ownership tips in there and real life examples. So shifting back to the Q&A. See here. So I like this question. What advice do you have for effective collaboration for a Scrum team who who is scaling without a scaling framework? So that's in parentheses with other Scrum teams and Kanban teams. So
Scale
collaboration between Scrum teams and also Kanban teams.
collaboration between teams, Scrum and Kanban, scaling without a scaling framework. Okay, I'm really glad this question came up because that's really important. Because even within a scaling framework, just because it's written down that you should do it a certain way doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that value. So even within a framework, you may have to consider what you need. I would say that frequent communication between the teams is a must somehow. Early in my career, we used to use a scrum of scrums where the folks from the team would get together and talk about what the dependencies were. That sometimes works, sometimes does not. Nexus, even if you're not using Nexus, you might borrow that idea of the daily scrum where the teams get together. So it's a scrum of scrums, but every day, where are we all going? What's the common goal? But frequent communication, and of course, I'm sort of answering the question with the question itself because you said, how do you effectively collaborate? And I'm saying collaborate, but that kind of is the question. Talk to the folks on the other teams. Hey, what do you need from us? How can we? And be intentional in designing your cross team conversations and collaboration. Um, how often do you need it? My advice is always start with daily. If that is overkill, you can pull back, but probably it's not. And you may need a check in the morning and a check in the afternoon. Ask, are we getting the value out of the collaboration we're getting? Are we building up dependencies we're not talking about? You may need more than a daily scrum type of thing, and you may need cross-team refinements where multiple people from a team or the maybe architects get together and talk about what are the problems, what are the pitfalls, and how are we going to manage them. Those may generate product backlog items that go into the product's uh, cycle of we got to fix this or we got to set this up properly so that we can get where we want to go. But there's no shortcut, there's no easy answer. It's make sure that you're talking and have meta conversations about the quality of your collaboration. Is this working for us? And if not, what should we do? So retrospectives are another good place to have those conversations. I hope that helps.
That's awesome. Thank you. That was really good advice as well. So this question kind of brings us back to that whole team empowerment topic. How would you suggest helping a team where the developers are really reluctant to step into an empowered space? They just want to be told what to do. Maybe it's a question for the Scrum Master, but any advice for a PO in this situation?
Yeah, developers who just want to be told what to do, or at least that's the perception you have. So I want to caution you to be careful of assuming you understand their motivation and ask a lot of questions. Now, sometimes you get that. They've said, just tell us what to do. Yeah, that is a question to collaborate with your Scrum Master on. But as a product owner, express trust in your team, give them a little leeway, and be cognizant of what you might have done to contribute to a feeling of we want to be told what to do. Because we can often accidentally step on someone's desire to innovate or experiment. And I unfortunately did that as a product owner. And that was my fault. I asked my team to take a risk and they did. And I did not check in with them often enough. And so sprint review came around and they had done something that was not even remotely what I thought they had done. And I was not as tactful as I might have been in saying, oh, that's not what I thought I was saying. And instead of phrasing it that way, I phrased it with very much, you got that wrong. So tact, communicating with your team, checking in with them frequently, but let them take a little risk and say, okay, you may get this wrong. And if you do, that's fine. We're never more than one sprint away from changing our direction. And if we get it wrong, we'll figure it out. We'll learn something from it. So be aware of your own tendencies or your own frustrations, because of course you've got pressures too. You've got people up above you in the organization who want stuff from you right now, and they're not really thrilled to hear, oh, we had a sprint where we didn't get the outcome we were expecting. So communication frequently, work with your Scrum Master to help have those conversations with your team, and maybe give them some space. Like, hey, this sprint, I'm not even going to set the goal. You know what the product goal is. What do you think that the sprint goal should be? And listen and maybe guide and nudge a little, but let them set the direction. Let them choose where they want to go, and test the waters that way. Hope that helps.
Thanks. Awesome.
Mm.
So,
Wait, one more thing. I want to say there, understand that developers may have come from a background where they do get smacked down, and you're going to have to do a lot more work to get them to understand that no one's breathing down their neck. So in one organization I was in, we had a team that was cooking along. We hired somebody in who was technically had all the chops, but they came from a company where the minute they stepped out of line, they got slapped. And so we had to, the product owner, Scrum Master, all of the developers had to work with this person. No, you're in a safer space now. And it took them a long time to believe it. So don't look for overnight changes.
great advice there. Thank you. All right. Yes, you need to understand their point of view and realize that everyone has had different experiences in the past too.
They
So,
often call these people skills soft skills. And I think that's a misnomer, because people are hard. It's really hard for us. So I think we need to give ourselves some slack and recognize that people skills are really, really difficult sometimes.
yes, absolutely. So this question is about roadmaps and timelines. So how do you approach roadmaps and timelines from an agile point of view? And this person mentioned a tool. I've tried Go Product Roadmap, but any other advice would be great.
Cool. I like the Go product roadmap. I've used that myself. I think that the challenge with roadmaps is that they can be seen as promises. And here's where metaphors can really trip us up. People hear roadmap and they think we're going to go here, we're going to go there, we're going to go this stop, and then we're going to get to our destination. And it's really more of a forecast. It always has to be. This is where we think we're going. Imagine you were taking a vacation and you had 2 weeks and you had no particular destination in mind. You just want to have fun. That's your objective. And so everybody says, okay, where are we? Well, I live in St. Pete, so we've never seen Savannah, and that's less than a day's drive away. Let's go to Savannah and see what there is to do in Savannah. And we kick around Savannah for a couple of days. And then that was fun, but we want to go see something else. So where's next? Well, let's go to Raleigh. Let's go to North Carolina and see what's up there. But on the way, we see um, what is that big thing in South Carolina, south of the border? Ooh, what's there? So we go kick around south of the border for a day, but always keeping in mind our objective is to have a little fun, but we also have to come home. Um, Product development can be a little bit like that, in that we don't exactly know where our direction is going, but we do have an objective in mind. So going back to the roadmaps, timelines, we know what we plan to do in the next couple of sprints. At least we have a good idea. The farther out, of course, the less we can really know. Next quarter, we think we're going to do these things, but we might not if we find out more, or if that becomes not valuable to do. And by the end of the year, we kind of hope we want to be here. But imagine that you were at the product, what's the Consumer Electronics Show, the year the iPad was released, and you had a tablet device that was very limited in its capabilities, and here comes the iPad. You're going to have to change your roadmap, because you're not going to stand up against that. So remember that a roadmap is just what we know now. It's not truly a map of where we are going, it's where we think we're going to go. Hope that helped.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great. I have a few resources that I could drop into the chat for that as well. This next question, so another stakeholder focused question. How do you handle stakeholders who keep changing the requirements and features?
Can you read that to me again, please?
Sorry, I said that quite fast. How do you handle stakeholders who keep on changing the requirements and features?
We applaud that. So remember, one of the principles behind Agile is that we welcome changing requirements, even late in development. What does that mean? It means we've learned something and we need to adjust and adapt. And so, as long as we're not hearing in the middle of the sprint, we want you to change what you're doing this sprint. Don't do that, do this. Well, then we're violating the agreement we have between business and development team of we'll leave you alone to do something valuable, but between sprints, we might change our minds. That's a problem. And you need to explain that no, we're going to go towards a goal and we're going to achieve that goal or do our darndest to get there at the end of the sprint. If you think the product goal needs to change, the time to talk about that is at the end of the sprint, unless there's always that, the world just blew up on you. I was working on a product that was an add-in to Microsoft Word, planned our sprint around a particular feature, and found out right after sprint planning, I think it might have been the next day, that Microsoft was going to put that feature in the next version of Office, and we didn't need to develop it anymore. So there's no point in continuing. We changed that. But if stakeholders are coming up with new ideas, great. That's what you want. You want them coming to you with, hey, what if we did this? It's not handling your stakeholders. Again, it's collaborating with them. And I'm picking on your language a little bit here, but the way we use language can inform the way we think about things. And rather than handling your stakeholders, collaborate with them. Why do you want this change? What value do you think it's going to deliver? Okay, great. Is that more or less valuable than the thing we're doing now? More? Okay. Where do you want to cut the tail on that? So it's collaboration and helping them to understand there's a cost to the change. If we really do need to cancel the sprint, remember, as a product owner, that's your prerogative, nobody else's. If we really do, there's a cost to that. If we're going to stop developing one feature at the end of the sprint so that we can develop another feature, well, we've got some value, hopefully, but understand that if you later say you want us to shift back to that first feature, there's still going to be a cost because we're going to have to get back up to speed on that. So helping them understand the costs as well as the benefits they expect to accrue from those changes. Hope that helps.
That's great advice. Thank you. All right. So I want to thank our listeners today because we have some really great questions coming in. So this question from Vanessa, how challenging is the transition from Scrum Master to product owner, especially with no technical knowledge?
How challenging is the transition from Scrum Master to product owner,
Yeah, so a
especially
change of roles.
change of, yeah. It can be,
Accountabilities, rather.
yeah, it can be quite challenging to shift from an accountability of the Scrum Master to the product owner. When I did that the first time, it was, I will not lie, it was really hard. I kept wanting to be involved in, helping run the retrospective and talking to the team members about more Scrum Mastery stuff, and actually had my Scrum Master say, I have a role to play and you are stepping on my role. And I was, okay, I had to step back. So it's a mindset shift. And then it was pointed out to me also that I really wasn't focusing on the value of the product because I was focusing on other things. So I had to work on what the value of the product is. With no technical knowledge, there's a debate on whether Scrum Masters and product owners should be technical, should have enough technical acumen to understand the problem domain you're in and the technical solutions to it. But you really want to let your developers tell you what the technical challenges are. But I think, yeah, that was the hardest thing for me, is remembering that my focus is now on the value of the product, not how do we use Scrum to get the value of the product. Does that make sense, Lindsay?
Yeah, it does.
So Vanessa, good luck to you. It's fun. It's a good shift. I've gone back and forth, and although right now I'm more Scrum Master, kind of I would welcome the chance to get back into product ownership again at some point.
Awesome. I'm so glad you could share an actual comparison with Vanessa to kind of help her with the mindset there. So very cool. So this next question, have you had any challenges with really siloed skill sets in teams, and how would you suggest you approach collaboration in that situation?
Have I had a problem with siloed skill sets on teams? Boy, have I. It's
Haven't
so common. This
we
is
all? But yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
this is
very
my story, and
challenging
this is
thing.
my story, and this is my story, and there's
Yes.
not really collaboration towards a goal. I work with the product owner to start with to make sure they understand product goal and are helping the team to set sprint goals that can be often challenging. Sometimes the siloed nature of the work comes from a lack of understanding of why we use Scrum. Not how, but why we're doing this in the first place, and it can be a mismatch with the organization's goals. But one of the things I will do is ask some questions about the team. Have you had a problem with this? The answer is never no. The answer initially is often no, no, it's fine. But when you dig a little deeper, you will find many tales and sprints where things didn't go as expected because someone got sick, or we thought we were going to be able to do this, but we forgot that Lori was going on vacation for 2 weeks and wasn't going to be available, and she was the only one who could do this. So pointing out those challenges and then saying, well, what would have helped? You'll hear knowledge transfer. Well, knowledge transfer is kind of a misnomer. We cannot transfer knowledge from my brain into someone else's brain, but we can certainly share our understanding and encourage pairing, encourage mobbing is another great technique for it, where people work together and we spread and diffuse that knowledge across the team. Then we really want to get into it, spread and diffuse that knowledge to other teams as well. But that's not the question you asked, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. All right. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So I want to go back to there are tons of stakeholder questions coming in. So I want to go back to that topic again. So how do you help the stakeholders when they are not sure of the features they want to be implemented? I have a project, I've had a project, oh, having a hard time reading the question. I've had a project before where the requirements are keep on changing and causing a lot of rework to the developers.
Okay, how do you help stakeholders when they're not sure of the features they want? Story mapping is a great technique. Is it Jeff Patton that created this idea of a story map so that we get an idea of where it is we want the product to go and focus on one particular user's path through, and then build some things that will help that user or that we think will help that user, and then test it. I'll go back to my earlier answer, understand what pressures the stakeholders have, where are they getting these sudden new ideas that are causing rework. I don't know that rework's necessarily a bad thing. If you're doing total teardowns and rebuilds, maybe constantly. But sometimes in development, we go, oh, hey, we built that and we don't need it to work exactly that way. We go do the work again. It can be a little frustrating. It's not really that big a deal, but understanding where the stakeholders are coming from, and again, helping them quantify to the best of their ability the value they're looking for. And here's where evidence-based management techniques can come in. We can talk about what is the current value of the product, what's the unrealized value we're trying to get, is this going to affect ability to innovate, is this going to affect time to market? Because if they want something new, it may slow down our ability to get this out to our audience. Is that okay? I liken it to if you were doing a play and suddenly the producer says, "Oh, I had this great idea and I asked the writer to insert a whole new scene." Oh, well, we're a week away from dress rehearsal. This is what's going to happen if you do that. Is it really going to make the play that much better? Maybe ask those sorts of questions. Is this going to be worth the delay that it's going to introduce? I hope that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. So we don't really have time. Sorry, my voice. We don't really have time for any more questions at this point. However, I have the full question list for Sam that I can share. So I will share that with you, Sam, and then we can figure out a way to address these open questions in some format or another. I do want to leave an opportunity for you, Sam. Is there any pieces of advice based on the types of questions that came in today or just about product ownership in general that you would like to share with our listeners?
I would say product ownership is really about empathy. And we often hear questions like, how do I, like I called out, how do we handle stakeholders? How do we make people do things? I don't think we heard a question with that particular language, but I do hear it. How do I make someone understand? You don't. Remember that when you are developing a product, somewhere along the line, you are hoping that product is helping someone's life get better. You're all about the people. So think about the humans, work on building empathy with everyone, your developers, with your stakeholders, with your customers, and uh, that's my second keep it under control for most of this. Remember that you are serving someone in some way, and that empathy is key to the product owner role, to product development.
Yes, absolutely. That is
There.
great advice there for product owners. So, thank you, everybody, for attending today. Like I said, and listening today on the Scrum.org community podcast. I will be in touch with Sam regarding the open questions. We'll figure out a way to get those addressed. And
On fodder.
yeah, thank you for listening and tuning in and joining us live as well. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you're located, and Scrum on. Thanks again, Sam.
Thank you.